sure to check out Agelessgeeks for your figures and collectibles. This video and YouTube channel is rated PG-13, so that means this channel is not for anyone under the age of 13. So what is going on, my fellow collectors? How is everybody doing today? Daredevil 19 here, and today in this video we will be doing my top 5 most disappointing figures of 2019. I'm not saying these are the worst figures ever made, or maybe one or two of them might have been, but I'm not saying that. These are just figures that disappointed me when I got them in hand once they released. And yes, it is coming to that time of the year, the end of the year, where everybody does their top 5, top 10, top whatever favorite figures or favorite things or dislikes of the year, which is 2019. So like I said, this is my top 5 most disappointing figures of 2019, and I will start it off with an honorable mention here, which is the Mafex The Dark Knight Trilogy, or Batman Begins version of Ra's al Ghul. Now, this figure isn't really too bad. That's why it didn't make my list. It does have some issues which I was not happy about at all, but like I said, it's not a bad figure. There is some issues that I did have with it, and one of them is the wrist joint on the left hand did break on me. Now, the reason why it broke on me is because whenever I get a figure, I articulate all the points of articulation to make sure nothing's stuck or something like that. Now, the wrist joints, even this one here, this one didn't break on me because I didn't risk trying to move it, but where the joint connects into the arms, you can't swivel them. And that's something I can't stand with figures, when the joints don't work properly. And that's why this joint broke off on me. I have sticky tack in there with another joint on there. It still doesn't work properly, but I'm still able to have them displayed with a hand right there that can still kind of articulate. So those are two main issues I did have with the figure. Another thing is, Mafex does have this problem a lot, even to this day when they release figures, is they make the peg holes on the hands a little too small for the wrist joints, and it does make it difficult to swap the hands. You have to widen the wrist joints a little bit so you don't risk breaking the wrist pegs. That's another thing. And then another thing I did not like with this Ra's, well, one thing here, this piece, I don't know what the hell is wrong with the torso, but it's not centered. See what I mean? I'm trying to center this piece right here, and it just keeps shifting back. So that that was a QC issue I did have with this Ra's. And then another issue I didn't like about this figure is the articulation isn't good, man. It's not a good articulated figure, and it really isn't fun to pose around, man. So if you don't have good articulation on a figure, it's not going to be a fun figure, and it's not going to be fun to pose it around and put it in different display options. So that's why he made the honorable mentions list. So that is technically coming in at number 6 on my honorable mentions list for my top 5 most disappointing figures of 2019, which is the Mafex The Dark Knight Trilogy Ra's al Ghul. So that is the honorable mentions. Now let's get into the list and start it off with number 5. Alright, so coming in at number 5 is a figure I do not own anymore. I ended up selling it because I disliked the figure. It's not a bad figure, but there was a few things about this figure that bugged me and that I did not like about the figure, and that is the Figma Predator. My main issue with this figure was the price point. This thing was way too expensive. Yeah, I know they had a famous sculptor or something sculpted, and that's why the price of it was a lot more expensive compared to a regular Figma figure release. So yeah, I understand why it was so expensive, but man, this thing was definitely way too expensive for my liking or my taste. So that was an issue I did have with the figure. My other big main issue with it, they made this thing way too tiny. This thing was way too small. It was like the same size as the Figma Guts figure, and Predators are like 8 feet tall, man. So that was like a shot in the gut to collectors of Predator figures. I wanted to display it with my SH Monsterarts Predator Wolf, since they're both import figures, but man, this thing looked like a kid Predator compared to the SH Monsterarts Predator wool. So it didn't even fit in scale with 6-inch scale figures. That was another issue I had with it. Yeah, I know it's not supposed to fit in with SH Monsterarts, but I'm saying even its own line, Figma, it was smaller than human characters. So yeah, they made it definitely way too small. Another thing I didn't like about it, which is kind of nitpicking, but with Predator figures, I like when figure companies make the Pred Dreads all their own dreadlock, all individually, like how SH Monsterarts did theirs, and how NECA does theirs. Now, Figma, for some reason, decided to clump them into 3 different parts, which didn't look good, and they made each part articulated, which is cool, but I definitely wasn't feeling it. I was not digging what they did with the Pred Dreads on the figure, but I mean, overall, it was a pretty cool figure, and maybe I should have put Ra's al Ghul at number 5, because the Predator did have some amazing detail. The Ra's al Ghul did too, but you know what? This Predator was more fun to pose around, unlike the Ra's figures, so yeah, maybe I should have put Ra's at 5, but I feel like this was more disappointing to me because it was such an expensive figure, and I was anticipating it and really excited to get it, unlike the Ra's al Ghul figure. So that's why I did put the Figma Predator at number 5 in my top 5 most disappointing figures of 2019 list. Now, coming in at number 4. And coming in at number 4 is practically everyone's favorite character from Game of Thrones. And when Mcfarlane announced they're doing a Game of Thrones line, I was pretty hyped for it because the figures looked pretty awesome. But Jon Snow, to me, didn't turn out as good as I was hoping. I know Mcfarlane updated his articulation, but it seems like he didn't really put too much of it in this figure here. He didn't put it in his Game of Thrones line, which was kind of confusing. And this list here, I'm only going by figures I have personally owned. I can't go by a figure that I haven't owned, because I can't judge a figure if I do not have it in my hands. So just needed to clarify that quickly. But yeah, this definitely came in at number 4 because there's a decent amount of things I was not too happy with the figure. First one, horrible articulation. Straight trash articulation. That's why I was saying I don't know why they didn't give him the more updated articulation Mcfarlane has been giving on his figures, like the Fortnite line or even his new Mortal Kombat line. So I was kind of confused why he still gave him kind of that older style Mcfarlane Walking Dead figure articulation. So that's my main issue with this figure. Another thing is the way they sculpted the torso into one whole piece with what he's wearing. You can't use the torso articulation, really. That's all you're going to get out of it. So that's something I'm not too happy about. Another thing is that. Come on, man. Really? What the hell is that? Loose joints. That is a no-no, man. Loose joints are horrible. Yeah, you can get stuff to fix it, but jeez, man. And another thing, I don't know if you could tell, the left foot is longer than the right foot, so he can't properly stand. Well, I mean, he can, but he'll be standing on like an angle, so that's another thing. And another thing I wasn't too happy with, he didn't come with any alternate hands, so he always has gripping hands going on with him. That's something I can't stand when figure companies give us figures with no alternate hands, and I know Hasbro does that a lot with their Black Series line, but Mcfarlane did it with his Game of Thrones line as well. So definitely not happy about that. And just all around, this is not a fun figure, man. It's not a fun figure at all. It's just pretty much a damn statue. You know what I mean? You're just going to be able to put him in this pose right here, and that's it. If you're fine with that, with articulated figures, then that's great. But for me, man, for articulated figures, if they're more like statues, you should have just made a damn statue, you know what I mean? So really was not happy with the execution of Mcfarlane's Jon Snow figure, and that's why he came in at number 4. Now moving on to the top 3, and coming in at number 3. Alright, and coming in at number 3 is a figure I really did not want to have to put on this list, but it's Mezco's fault that it is on this list. This was one of my most anticipated figures from Mezco this year, and they just let me down with this release here. It's someone cosplaying as Daredevil. I know some people were trying to say maybe it's Bullseye under the mask, but that's one issue I do have with the figure right off the bat. Now, before this released, we got the black suit, vigilante suit Daredevil, and those face sculpts look great, look just like Charlie Cox, but for some reason this one does not look like him, man, and it even doesn't even look like the guy who played Bullseye either. It just looks like some dude cosplaying as Daredevil. So that was my main issue with the figure. I don't know what the hell happened, but yeah, that definitely isn't good. It's just some dude cosplaying as Daredevil. Another thing is, the cloth material they have on the figure now is different compared to all the times they showed it. Even in the promo pictures, it was different and looked so much better. The cloth material they had before this looked way better compared to what we got here. This still looks pretty good, but I don't know why they switched it, man. It does not look as good as it did in the promo images and when we would see it on display. So that is another main issue I did have with this figure, is that they last minute they switched up the material of the Daredevil suit, the cloth clothing. So definitely was not happy about that. Another one is, I guess it's really the ankle joints that I'm not too happy with, because that's just a horrible ankle pivot right there, man. What the hell? What the hell is that? Alright, so I guess the articulation isn't too bad. I'm just not happy with the ankle joints. Let me rephrase that. I'm not happy with the ankle articulation with this Daredevil. And my other big main issue with this is Mezco is known for giving you tons of accessories with their figures, because you're paying almost $100 for these figures. Well, close to $100, and 90% of the time or 80% of the time they hook us up with a ton of awesome accessories, especially when it's characters they personally like a Batman. But for some reason this Daredevil was included with practically nothing, man. He just has one alternate head, his batons, and then a couple alternate hands, and that's it. And of course the stand and stuff. It's like, really, man? That's all you included with the figure? How come we couldn't get these billy clubs with the bendy wire on it like how we did with the comic version Daredevil, or maybe some more alternate heads or an unmasked Matt Murdock head sculpt? They just really lowballed us, man, when it came to accessories for this figure. And that is another big issue I do have with this Daredevil. Even the vigilante suit Daredevil barely came with anything. He came with the same amount of stuff this Daredevil came with. So it's just, was not happy with this release at all. It was an extreme disappointment to me, and that's why he came in at number 3 on my top 5 most disappointing figures of 2019. Now moving on to number 2, which is a group of figures. And coming in at number 2, as I said, it is a group of figures. I decided to clump them just into one, which is my number 2 pick, and that is the DC Collectibles Batman vs. TMNT figures. And I ended up just canceling my Shredder and Ra's al Ghul set. I just wanted it for Shredder, but the Shredder just looked not fun at all to pose around, man. And that's my biggest issue with these figures. They are no fun at all to pose around. No fun whatsoever. That is my biggest issue and complaint with these figures. And like I said with a couple other figures, if your figures are not fun to pose around, they might as well just be damn statues, man. These things were not fun to pose around. Usually when I'm taking pictures of figures for the end of the review, when I show you what types of poses you can get them into, you could barely get these figures into any freaking poses, man. It was just a pain in the ass trying to articulate them and pose them around. I didn't even end up reviewing the Michelangelo and Alfred set because it's just, I didn't like reviewing these figures. It wasn't fun because they're not fun to pose around, and I just felt like they made them just to throw them out there. Yeah, I was happy as hell when DC Collectibles announced these figures, they look like they're going to be a ton of fun to pose around and look cool displayed together. Yeah, they look really cool displayed together. You definitely can't deny that, but the fun factor for these are like just below zero, man. Just really not too much fun to pose around at all. Another issue I have with them, the worst figure out of the bunch is Robin right here. This figure, he can't even hold his weapon there. And just look at his legs. What the frick is that, man? All of them have that. The loose leg syndrome. But his is the worst. They even have difficulty standing because, god damn it, because you can't articulate the turtle's feet any further forward than that. And if they fall back, any slight touch, they'll fall backwards, and that goes for all of them, man. So at least the Bat family figures, you can articulate their feet a little further forward so they can balance out a little bit better, unlike the turtles. And I did have a few breaks. One of them is the handle to Leonardo's sword. Actually, I think that's the only break I did have. Yeah, one of the handles broke on Leonardo's swords, and I don't like the way his sheaths peg in. They unpeg really easily and fall out all the time when you're trying to pose around the figure there. All the turtles have horrible neck articulation, man. They all do, actually. They all have just bad articulation, man. Really bad movement. The loose joints, like I said, irritates me. Another thing, pretty much half the figures, their joints, they would fall apart. Like Leo's leg would constantly pop off. He would fall apart constantly, and she would as well. She came apart when I was trying to take her out of the damn packaging. It was just like, oh, what the hell, man? And another thing is, with the turtles, you get a lot of like plastic rub or paint rub. I think it's more plastic rub from articulating their legs. But yeah, man, just these are all around not fun figures to pose around, and to me that's definitely not a good thing when it comes to figures, articulated figures. You know, if you can't articulate them around and put them in a bunch of different cool poses, what's the point of them being articulated figures? So that's why this whole line here came in at number 2 on my top 5 most disappointing figures of 2019. Now moving on to my number 1 most disappointing figure of 2019. And hate is a very strong word, but I could say with this figure, I hate it. I absolutely hated this figure. So let's see what my number 1 most disappointing figure of 2019 is. And coming in at number 1, drum roll please, is the SH Monsterarts Godzilla King of the Monsters, King Ghidorah. Like I said, hate is a strong word, but I absolutely hate this figure. I hate it, I hate it, I hate it. This is probably up there with the Mezco 112 Gladiator Hulk. Not a fun figure at all. At all. No fun whatsoever. More of a hassle, more of a pain in the ass. I did not like reviewing this figure. I hated taking pictures of it, trying to pose it around. I got so many stabs from the damn thing. Pieces falling off everywhere. The articulation was crappy besides the articulation on the heads. That was perfectly fine, or the necks. The articulation was fine on that, but everywhere else the articulation sucked. The wings, you connect to the figure. Same with the tails. I hated the tails and I hated the wings. Those were probably the 2 things I hated most about this goddamn figure. First of all, the wings were so damn heavy, the joints could barely hold them in poses. And not just that, when you connect them, one of them connected properly and wouldn't fall off all the time, but my other one, I think my right wing, constantly kept falling off, and that kept stabbing the shit out of me too, man. But not just that, it was so annoying that it kept falling off every time. Like, what the hell? Why isn't this thing connecting properly like how the left wing was? That drove me crazy. And then the tails. The tails had the same type of articulation as the neck, or like the SH Figuarts Shenron figure, but for some reason the tails kept disconnecting in all different points of articulation on me, and it was driving me nuts. And those tails are so damn sharp. Those things were stabbing the hell out of me too. But having pieces that are supposed to connect and stay connected, constantly unconnecting, especially with a figure like this, you don't understand how frustrating, annoying, and irritating that is. If you own the figure and had these issues as well, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. And another thing, the figure was more like a statue, and like I've been saying, if it's an articulated figure and it's more like a statue, what is the point of it being an articulated figure? It was not a fun figure to pose around at all. It was, like I said, more of a hassle, just a pain in the frickin' ass, man. I absolutely hate this figure. I don't think I will ever buy any other type of King Ghidorah figure from SH Monsterarts ever again. This thing just sucks as an articulated figure, and that is why it definitely made it as my #1 most disappointing figure of 2019. I should call it my most hated figure of 2019. But anyway, that is my list of my top 5 most disappointing figures of 2019, including this honorable mention. Hope you enjoyed it. Let me know in the comments below if you have a top 5 or top 3 most disappointing figures list as well. Let me know in the comments below. I want to see what figures you were extremely disappointed with this year or absolutely hated, like how I hated that King Ghidorah figure. Let me know in the comments below. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you would like to support the channel, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell. And if you liked it, feel free to give it a thumbs up. If you didn't like it, oh well, I guess we have different opinions about figures. But anyway, thanks for watching. I will see you later.